Now we're going to start working with them. And it says express each in terms of I and simplify if possible. Well, what you're looking at is this one. Technically speaking, this is the same as the square is 36. Then you have minus 1. This becomes the square root of 36 times the square root of negative 1 using the properties of multiplication of radicals. Or square root of 36 is 6. Square root of negative 1 we've defined to be I, it's 6I. So if I just look at the square root of negative 36, it's 6I. But that's how it's working. This says take the opposite of negative 45. What's the opposite of, and I'm going to be anal about this, I'm going to put in lots of steps. It's 3 parts because it's negative. Negative 1 is at the end. And the square is 9. The unsquare is left over is 5. And negative 1. So if I multiply it all together, it's negative 45. So it's the opposite of square root of 9 is 3. Then you've got the square root of 5. And the square root of negative 1 is I. Now, lots of times you'll find it written this way. This is the correct way, mathematically correct way of writing it. I'm not going to put the correct way, because in your book you're going to see they oftentimes do this. And the reason why they do that is so you don't think the I is under the radical. That's the only reason why they do it. If I look at the mathematically correct way of writing the answer, it's this guy. But often you see it written this way, so you know that the I isn't under the radical.
Which one are you looking at?
I don't care, just give me the correct answer. Doesn't matter which way you write it. Sometimes it'll say put it in the form A plus B times I.
Yeah.
Now this is 6, subtract the square root of negative 98, so square root, and since it's negative, I've got 3 parts. And I think it's 49 and 2. So it's 6, subtract, square root of 49 is 7, left over is the square root of 2, square root of negative 1 is I, and then that's what your answer is. I can't add them because they don't have i's. Think of i's like they behave like x's. If you think of an I like an x, except you're not solving for I, right? Think i's like x's. Whatever you do with x's, you do the same thing with i's. There's only one thing that's different, and that's when you square I, it's negative 1. That's the only thing that's different. Only thing's different. Which is why when it comes down to adding and subtracting, it says add. Well, if I look, the coefficient here is 1, coefficient there is 1, and it says I can just write it without parentheses. It's straight addition. And treat it just like you would x's. 6 and 4 don't have an x, or don't have an I. You have a 5i and you have a 3i. So it's 10 plus 5i plus 3i is 8i. It's just like when you said with x's or square roots or anything else. It's just no different. And that's an a plus bi form. A being the number and B and being the guy with the I thing. And B can be negative. Now, the difference here, this is a 1, this is a negative 1, so what does it do to this when we subtract? Change the signs, yeah. So it's 11 plus 8i minus 2 minus 5i. So 11 minus 2 is 9. 8i minus 5i is plus 3i. I treat the i's like x's and you'll have no problems.
Do you want it in that form?
It says a plus bi, so it's this in front. Would I mark it wrong if you wrote it the other way, even if I said a plus bi? No. But your book is going to always put it in that form. Now the multiply, unfortunately, you have to simplify first, find the product. And negative 25 is 5i times negative 16 is 4i. And 5i times 4i is 20i squared. And what did I tell you about I squared? It's negative 1. The only thing you have to remember. So 20 times negative 1 is negative 20. This is just the distributive property. 6i times 3 is 18i minus 6i times 5i is 30i squared. And we know that I squared is negative 1. So this is 18i plus 30. There's nothing wrong with that answer except it says put it in a plus bi form. And that means the 30 goes first and the 18i comes next. I'd accept either one. And since it's a binomial times a binomial, guess what we need to do? FOIL it. So, first 20, inner plus 5i, outer plus 24i, lasts plus 6i squared, 20 plus 29i plus 6. What do we know about I squared?
24i.
Minus
24i on the bottom. You just put 29.
But 5i plus 4i is 29i.
Oh, okay. You just
Phew.
got it.
And
Minus 6.
times minus 1, right? So it's 20 plus 29i minus 6, or 14 plus 29i. That's an a plus bi form. And all its gory detail. Do you have to put that much detail in? No. But you put as much in so you don't make a mistake. Start making mistakes, put in more detail. This just looks ugly. Firsts, inner, outer, lasts, while the inner outers add the 0. So this becomes 25 minus square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 9. And I squared we know is negative 1. So this is 25 plus 3, or 28. Notice I lost my eyes. I wonder where they went.